Before the marriage, she was into sales when he first met her. He had come home from college and was spending the summer holidays with his folks. It was his first year at uni, and he didn't do the usual student escape to the beach. He loved his parents and decided to spend the holidays with them. Besides, he kind of owed them. They were, after all, paying his tuition fees. The doorbell rang and he raced downstairs to open it. There, in glorious splendor, was an angel, carrying a cane basket, with an Avon badge. "Hi, I'm Melinda, your local Avon representative. Is the lady of the house at home?" Ben was speechless. Sure, I'll get my mom." "Mom, it's Melinda, the Avon representative," he yelled up the stairs. "Right, Ben. Be down in a minute. Ask her in." "Okay." Come in, Melinda. I'll take you to the lounge." Ben showed her the way, and they both sat down. He couldn't take his eyes off her. She was impeccably dressed and made up as if she was ready for a night on the town. Not in a flashy way, but in a professional way, as if she was off to an opera performance. Her long brown hair was carefully tied back. The shadow she used on her eyes accentuated the greenness of them. It was these eyes which stared back at him with a hint of amusement. "So do you often take to staring speechlessly at women, Ben, was it?" Melinda asked with a hint of a smile. No. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to be rude. Yes, it is Ben, it's just that you surprised me. I wasn't expecting someone like you at the door." "Oh gosh, that didn't sound right, did it?" "When I say that, I mean you really are very beautiful and it took me by surprise." "Sorry." By this time, Melinda was having trouble holding back her chuckles. "It's okay, Ben. I am usually greeted by the women of the houses I visit. Most of them know me, but this is a new neighborhood for me. I am expanding my area. I dress like this so that I can sell my products more easily. I am, after all, selling beauty products." She then paused and seemed to stare at Ben in the same way he was staring at her so embarrassingly before. This time she seemed a little uncomfortable. "So how come you are here? Do you go to Little Mount High?" "No, I used to, but now I am studying accounting and business at Perth Uni. First year. I am just home for the summer vacation." At that point, Mary, Ben's mom, came in. She briefly studied the two youngsters and greeted Melinda. "Hi, I'm Mary Jefferson, Ben's mom." "And you're?" "Hi, Mary, I'm Melinda and I'll be your Avon representative," stated Melinda as she stood to shake Mary's hand. "It's lovely to meet you. I hope I can interest you in some of our new products, but if not, I will leave a brochure behind and see you again next week." They both sat down beside each other on the larger lounge seat and left Ben sitting rather awkwardly on his own. This was women's business, and he was way out of his league. The two women were discussing in depth the pros and cons of some sort of lipstick which Melinda magically produced from her cane basket. There followed a similar process with a whole range of beauty products which, again, Melinda produced from her basket. It seemed that she had samples of the whole catalog in that basket. She must have everything in there, Ben mused. It must take some effort lugging that basket around the streets and still look so perfect. Mary interjected his thoughts. "Ben, could you get us some cool water?" "Melinda, I'll take each of these," she said as she isolated some of the products. "Mary, what usually happens is that you order them with me now and I will get them from my supplier. I will then deliver them next week, along with the new catalog. I aim to visit each week, especially during the school break." Ben couldn't help thinking, she's going to be here again next week. Cool. The ladies said their goodbyes and Ben led Melinda to the door. "Maybe see you again next week, Ben," Melinda said with a hint of promise. "I'll try not to surprise you so much then." Sure, Melinda. "Sorry about my rudeness. It's a D. See you then." He closed the door before he could embarrass himself further as she walked back down the path. Ben stared at her through the glass door insert as she rounded the gate to the next house. She was dressed and made up to look like a professional businesswoman with all the confidence in the world. It was the cane basket which was the anomaly. Yet she must be almost the same age as himself. He was 19, so she must be 18 if she was not yet at uni. Melinda seemed to pause suddenly and glance back to Ben's house. Did she just do that? Ben thought. "She seems like a lovely girl," Mary called out. "I think she will do very well in this neighborhood. It is great that she carries all of the items in the sales catalog. Sometimes it's hard buying something just from the small picture in a brochure. I tell you, she has the poise and confidence of a real saleswoman and the looks to go with it." Mary glanced knowingly at Ben. "Don't you think?" She laughed. "You couldn't keep your eyes off her the whole time she was here. I think I even saw your tongue hang out and a bit of drool escaping your lips. This time she was full of gasping chuckles. Yes, oh come on, Mum. I wasn't that bad, was I? Just joking, son. She is very pretty, though. I am sure you will meet her again next week. She said she walks this neighborhood every Tuesday, in case you're interested. Again, the chuckles as she disappeared upstairs, leaving Ben to his thoughts. Thoughts of an angel named Melinda. The courtship phase, the first date, went very well. Ben and Melinda hit it off from the very start. The first date progressed to a second, then a third, and soon they were inseparable. Melinda always made it clear, though, that she was devoting time to her selling. Many times, Ben was put to the side while Melinda pursued her business aspirations. It became a normal aspect of their relationship. Ben was not fazed by this trait in Melinda. He actually admired her determination and perseverance to succeed at what she set her heart on. The following years were busy for the young married couple. Ben worked hard to improve his skills at his job and received compliments from his colleagues. Melinda also advanced in her career, showing dedication and determination. They often felt tired from the long hours they put into their respective careers, but their love and mutual support helped them weather the challenges. They found joy in laughing together and in expressing their love for each other. The honeymoon phase, the wedding, was a joyous celebration. Everyone witnessed the deep love and devotion between Ben and Melinda. She's a keeper, Ben, Mary whispered to Ben as he watched his bride mingle around the hall. Do right by her, or I'll make sure you regret it. Mum, there's no need to talk like that. I love her more than anything else. Of course I'll treat her right. You and Dad raised me to always do the right thing. What do you expect? I'm proud of you, Ben, as is your dad. If he was still with us, he would tell you so to your face. You made a great choice. Now go join your bride. There were tears of joy in Mary's eyes as she turned and found some distant relatives to catch up with. Ben reminded her so much of her long-deceased husband. The first 2 years of marriage were hectic for the young couple. Ben dedicated himself to his job, putting in long hours to excel. Melinda was also ambitious in her career, rapidly climbing the ranks of management. Their hard work led to exhaustion at times, but their love and common sense helped them overcome it. It was during one of these relaxing cuddle sessions, or high-powered executive centering activities, as Melinda jokingly called them, that they both started to say, simultaneously, "Babe, we need to talk." The talk, they fell into surprised silence at their obvious synchronicity. Melinda broke the silence first. Ben, I have been offered a promotion. Wow, love. That was quick. What is it to? I also have something to discuss with you, but you carry on first. It is a senior management position. My boss called me into his office today and couldn't speak highly enough of me. He said that in all of his years, he has never seen such a determined, skilled employee. He continued to say that the company was expanding to the East Coast and that it needed someone like me to drive it there. She paused. Her eyes only seemed to sparkle a bit brighter at her excitement. Ben's eyes were teary with pride for his beautiful, talented wife. My boss also said that if you and I wanted to have children, we should do it now because this position would only demand more and more of my time. Again, she paused to let the enormity of that statement settle in. There is a 2-year lead into this position. So, Melinda, that is wonderful news. I have wanted us to start a family for some time, and I know you have too. I know of the perfect time to start. The smile in Ben's eyes hinted at a night of unbridled love and affection, this time without any worries. Melinda melted into his arms. She knew that look and loved it. Even with all of the joy and excitement that the news brought, there was a hint of sadness in Melinda's eyes. Ben picked up on it right away. What's up, babe? Is there something else? Melinda looked Ben square in the eyes and said in a low voice, there is a cost, Ben. It will mean I have to split my time between here and Littlemount and Sydney. It is a 2-week rotation. I will be away a lot and with children. That is going to be hard on both of us, but particularly you. The last statement was said with a deep sigh of resignation, almost as if this fantastic career opportunity would not happen. Melinda, my love, this can happen. My news is that I have looked into starting up my own accounting firm which would operate here from our home. My boss gave his blessing to my aspirations, saying that although he would be sad to see me go, he could see that I could make a great start and that if I specialized more, he could throw consultation work to me. Don't you see, with Mom's help, the children will be fine. I want you to chase your dreams, my wonderful, determined, talented love. Melinda dissolved into tears. tears of joy, relief, but in love. Her loving husband wanted what was best for her and was willing to sacrifice a lot to make it happen. That night was a joyful expression of their love and devotion to each other, as well as an excited hope that their journey together had reached a new chapter. The bad news: it didn't. The doctors were confused as to why a young couple, such as themselves, were unable to conceive. God help them. Finally, the various medical specialists came to an agreement. Melinda and Ben would not be able to have a baby. This devastated both of them. They were exhausted to their core. Melinda often broke down in tears, and many nights, Ben just held her as she processed the fact that she would never be a mom. Ben didn't know what to do. He comforted her when she was sad and held her tight when she gasped those tearful sighs of resignation. He, too, felt the pain of never being a father. This lasted for 2 months, until suddenly, Melinda woke one morning with a determined look on her face. She bore a straight, confident expression and showed the same determined eyes she once held when she was determined to succeed at one of her goals. "Ben, I am going ahead with the senior exec job. I will tell my boss that as of next week, I will begin." She finished her statement and looked strangely at Ben. He could see the instant change in her, and while it frightened him a little, because of her lack of consultation with him, he admired the fact that she had overcome her sadness and emerged as the determined, confident person he knew so well. He sensed that it would be a new beginning for their relationship. But hey, that's what he signed up for when he made those all-important vows way back when. "I love you, Melinda. Welcome back. Welcome back. You know I will support you with whatever it takes," she cried, tears of joy as she held Ben tightly. This embrace lasted for a while, until with a sharp intake of breath and a renewed sense of determination, she left for work. Then followed a period of intense training for Melinda and lots of comforting hugs from Ben. He had taken the leap to establish his own business from home and was pleasantly surprised at the positive feedback he received in the short time that it took Melinda to fully embrace her new role. He was well onto a firm path with his own accounting business. The extra hours that Melinda had to spend training and familiarizing herself were used by Ben to expand his own business. Though their time together was diminishing, they both felt secure in their relationship. Both being very practical people allowed them the wisdom to appreciate the time they had together without feeling neglected or bitter. The difficult topic of not having children remained unspoken, almost like an unwritten rule. The future was their goal. Ben in his business and Melinda in her role as a high-end executive. A new phase then the night of the big announcement came. They both sat down for a rare dinner at home when Melinda quietly stated, "Ben, love, it is time for me to spend time in Sydney. The boss says I am ready to take on the big challenges in that city on behalf of the company." Now, Perth is not a small town. It is a city known as the Western Outpost of Australia. It is the hub of the immense iron ore industry, among others, which are situated in Western Australia. But Sydney is where all of the real action is. Sydney is the center of all of the major export industries: wine, coal, iron ore, sugar, wool, along with numerous other primary industries, all have their head offices there. If a company wanted to make it for real, they would need to have a strong presence in Sydney. Ben knew that, as did Melinda. They both knew that Melinda's role would be extremely challenging. Melinda, with her natural confidence and determination to succeed, approached the task with excitement. Ben, with his unwavering love for Melinda, approached her challenge with pride. They finished their meal and prepared for the next phase of their relationship. Melinda would spend 2 weeks in Sydney and 2 weeks in Perth. In between would be the 5.5-hour flight infamously known as the red eye. Ben knew that he wouldn't hear from Melinda every night. The 2-hour time difference, coupled with her long work meetings, made constant communication impossible, and they both accepted that. Months of this schedule became the new normal, and they both settled into it quietly. Ben would see Melinda off at the front door as she entered the taxi to the airport. Phone calls between them would be fairly short and at irregular hours, as determined by Melinda's schedule in Sydney. These calls were enough to maintain a comfortable closeness while Melinda was away. On her return, the taxi would arrive and Melinda would disappear into bed for at least 12 hours after hugging her husband. The red-eye flight always had this effect on her, and it wouldn't be until the second night she was home that they would express their love for each other, reestablishing their closeness and love. Melinda would then immerse herself in her role at the Perth office of the company. Ben's business now had a very loyal client base, and he was becoming well known amongst the Perth accounting firms as a reliable and knowledgeable expert in the field of forensic accounting. Their lives were going well. They were doing well financially and had a great group of friends who were always there for support and good times. They loved spending time with their friends' kids, and it fulfilled their desire to have children of their own. Their work situation was a bit different from the norm, but everyone in their friend group seemed to accept it without question. Everything seemed perfect until one night, 3 years after they started their unique work arrangement. Ben was at home, working on some household finances when he noticed something strange. There was a statement addressed to his wife, but it was under her maiden name, Melinda Hines. He hadn't known she still used her maiden name since they got married. The statement was for a credit card with charges for restaurants, hotels, and clothing stores. The address on the statement was wrong and had been redirected to her company's head office in Perth. Ben realized that the Sydney address was just 2 units off from the correct one. It seemed like the owners of that unit knew where Melinda worked and sent the statement there. Ben was familiar with the apartment Melinda stayed in while she was in Sydney. It was obviously a mistake, but his forensic accounting instincts kicked in and he decided to investigate further. The next day, he called the adult shop to inquire about the charges on the statement. He explained that he received the statement on behalf of his partner, Melinda Hines. The person on the other end, named Hillary, knew Melinda well and mentioned that she often shopped at the store. Ben was referred to as John, and Hillary mentioned seeing them together. She even suggested that they visit the store again to check out the new range of black clothes. Ben was shocked and couldn't find the right words to respond. Hillary noticed the poor connection and suggested they talk later. Ben hung up the phone and sat in his chair, overwhelmed with despair. Part of him wanted to believe that there was a reasonable explanation for all this, but his rational side, as a forensic accountant, knew that his marriage was likely in trouble. He felt torn between these two conflicting thoughts, unsure of what to do next. Maybe a glass of wine would help calm his nerves? The wine didn't provide the relief he was seeking. It only led him to a drunken slumber, which lasted until noon the next day. Ben stumbled into the kitchen and made himself a sandwich, unable to remember what he put in it. He mindlessly ate, his thoughts filled with indecisiveness. As he reached for another bottle of wine, he suddenly realized the path he was heading down. He shuddered and fell to the floor, overcome with grief. He didn't want to accept what his logical side was telling him, but the facts were difficult to ignore. Suppressing his sobs, Ben called the apartment complex where Melinda stayed while in Sydney. He spoke to the manager, Bruce, asking if he remembered the date when they moved in together. He wanted to surprise Melinda with flowers to commemorate their first living arrangement. Bruce thought for a moment and recalled the details. Ben was married to Melinda 2 years ago in January, and they moved in together about 6 months before that, which would have been around June or July 2.5 years ago. Ben let the phone slip from his hand, overwhelmed with the facts that were piling up. Melinda owned cloth that she never shared or showed to him. She frequently shopped at an adult shop called Dare to be Bare Almost. She shopped there with a man named John. She openly used her maiden name for a credit card. She started her affair 2.5 years ago. She married John 2 years ago. They lived together in her apartment in Sydney. Melinda had been unfaithful. Ben realized he had been a fool, completely oblivious to what was happening right in front of him. Feelings of despair and hatred washed over him, emotions he had never experienced before. He questioned why Melinda would do this after everything they had been through. The logistics of her double marriage also puzzled him. How was she able to fool the marriage registrar into allowing her to get married twice? With a heavy heart, Ben knew that his marriage to Melinda was over. He couldn't trust her anymore after discovering the truth. Love and trust were replaced by a seething hatred, an emotion he had never felt before. He had practical matters to attend to and realized he had time to prepare before Melinda returned home in 2 weeks. Working from home allowed him to adjust his schedule as needed. His first priority was handling the finances. Melinda had her own credit card under a different name, so Ben set up separate accounts for himself. He moved his cash into his own personal account and made arrangements to dissolve his business. He contacted each of his clients individually to explain the situation, and most were understanding. He also changed the beneficiaries of his retirement account to his mom. Next came the house. He and Melinda were joint owners, so there wasn't much that could be done with it. He really wanted to sell it, but knew he couldn't legally. Fortunately, it was paid off, so it would be a 50-50 split of any forced sale. Her belongings? Ben decided to box all of her belongings up and have them ready to be shipped out. The receiving address was where she stayed in Sydney. He would arrange to send them on the day before she was due home. That way they would arrive there at least a week after she arrived back in Perth. She would have no idea where they went until they arrived there. She would arrive here in the Perth home to an empty house. Ben arranged to rent an apartment in the center of Perth. He would be closer to his client base and could still work from there when the dust settled after the divorce. All of his belongings were sent there and set up. It didn't feel like home, but it was better than the house, which now brought up sad memories and bitter feelings. Nothing was in the new apartment that would remind him of Melinda and their past life together. Now the legal stuff. He saw a divorce lawyer and got the paperwork started so that she could be served when she arrived home. Ben knew the timing of her arrival, as it never varied, and let the court server do their work. Last order of business was the guy who married her. He deserved some payback. Ben booked a flight to Sydney, which coincided with her flight back to Perth. He would hopefully arrive in Sydney before she arrived in Perth. He needed this to happen so that she could not warn that guy John. The day of the flights arrived and Ben arrived in Sydney 1 hour after Melinda departed for Perth. Perfect. She was incommunicado for at least 4 more hours. He made straight for the apartment complex and requested to speak with the manager. Bruce greeted him with a curious look. "Yes, mate. What seems to be the trouble?" Ben outlined the sad tale and showed him pictures of Melinda and him at their wedding, and his own driver's license. Bruce was flabbergasted, to say the least. "Wow, mate. This is a real mess. I don't know what I can do, but I want no trouble here. Understand? Bruce, you've already done a lot, but can I ask one favor? Firstly, is John in the apartment right now? And can I get up there to meet him under some pretext? Maybe tell him that I am a prospective apartment buyer, and could I preview his apartment very quickly, because the one I want to buy has the same view. Would he buy that?" "Ben, I have to tell you, mate, that John is a really nice guy. I have spoken with him quite a bit. He is friendly and seems genuine. I don't think he has it in him to be a jerk, especially one who would pull this kind of stunt. Just take it easy on him, all right?" Reluctantly, Ben promised that he only wanted to talk to John. That's all. They made their way to apartment 276. Bruce knocked on the door, and when it opened, there stood John. It surprised Ben to see that he was almost the splitting image of himself. There were obvious facial differences, but everything about him reminded Ben of himself. His stature, dress, body shape all mirrored his. His face had a gentle demeanor, and when he spoke to Bruce, his voice was calm and measured. This was not what Ben expected. He expected to at least see a man who projected jerk. He expected a smart dude with a hard, cruel voice, someone dressed as an arrogant playboy. Ben was taken aback. By this time, Bruce had convinced John of the truth of their cover story, and he introduced Ben to John. Meeting the guy Ben, "This is John, the co-resident of the apartment. John, this is Ben." They shook hands, and Ben immediately felt a genuineness in his handshake. It was warm, yet firm. "John, pleased to meet you. Thanks a lot for allowing me this chance to see what an apartment at this side of the building is like. I won't take much of your time. May I quickly look around?" "No problem, Ben. This is a bit unusual, but go ahead. Sorry my wife isn't here, but she has unusual work schedules and flew out just this morning. To tell you the truth, it is probably a welcome interruption to my workday." "Oh, what work are you in?" Ben asked while glancing around the lounge area. What he saw took him by utter surprise. The furnishings were nearly the same as Melinda and his house in Perth. Even the photos were in the same photo frames and in the same places. He could feel his anger beginning to surface and had to fight to keep it under control. There was much he had to learn first, and going crazy right now would not achieve anything. He barely heard John's answer. "I work from home as a software engineer. It suits me perfectly, as I could never work in a crowded office. Far too many distractions. What about you, Ben? What do you do for work?" Ben considered telling him a made-up story but thought better of it. "Hey, we could be brothers. I also work from home as a forensic accountant. Like you, it suits me perfectly as well." By this time, Bruce was getting nervous, expecting at any moment to see a conflict. Ben decided to glean as much info as he could. "I couldn't help but notice that wedding photo over there." "May I?" "Sure. Go ahead. That's Mel, my wife. We have been married for 2 years. Bruce here arranged our reception right here at the apartment complex. Again, sorry she isn't here right now. She works strange hours, but it works for us." There was a pause while Ben studied the photo. It was Melinda, all right. He felt tears begin to well up as he once again felt the depth of her betrayal. To hide his watery eyes, he quickly replaced the photo and walked cursorily around the apartment, even glancing into the main bedroom. It struck Ben again how similar everything was to the Perth house. Eyes under control, but anger still bubbling. He surprised himself at not feeling any animosity towards John. Everything about him oozed sincerity and friendliness. He just couldn't hate the guy. Ben was torn. One part of him just wanted to teach this guy a lesson. The other part of him wanted to learn more and understand how all of this came to be. He would need closure to this sad chapter of his life. Look, John, I really appreciate you letting me in like this. Can I repay you with lunch? My treat. Bruce, do you know any good restaurants around here where we can get a better meal than burgers and fries? Bruce was almost speechless, but managed to say, yes, sure. Mario's Italian right around the block. You can walk there. The lasagna is amazing, and they have a large selection of red wine. John knows the way. He and Mel often go there, right, John? He paled as he added the last part. Now he expected a confrontation, but it didn't happen. Right, John, let's go. Bruce, do you want to come as well? Nah, I'm good. I've got work to do, you know. But you two go right ahead. This situation was going to be part of his bar stories for years to come. The walk to Mario's was pleasant enough. John was indeed a really friendly guy, and it was hard for Ben to maintain any negative feelings towards him. As he took part in the relaxed conversation with John, he decided to be honest with him. John was also obviously unaware of the true situation. It was during the main course, the renowned lasagna, that Ben brought out a photo of him and Melinda. It was their wedding photo. John, you let me see your lovely wedding photo, so I think it's only fair that I do the same. Take a close look. Ben carefully laid the photo out for John to see. Wow, Ben. That's crazy. If I didn't know any better, I would say that that is my wife, Mel. They say that everyone has a doppelganger somewhere in the world. That's incredible. He continued to study the photo. What's your wife's name? Ben kept wanting to say, not wife, but soon to be ex-wife. Instead, he replied, Melinda. She used to go by Melinda Hines. John didn't register the last name right away, but seemed focused on her first name. Melinda? And my wife's name is Mel. That could be short for Melinda. Right there was a long pause while John took a long drink of his wine. Wait a minute. Is this some kind of joke? Are we on a hidden camera show or something? Did you say Melinda Hines? Hines? Yes, John, I did. There are things we need to talk about. The color drained from his face to be replaced by a flush of anger. Now listen here, you jerk. Are you trying to tell me that you married my wife, Mel? You wife-stealing scumbag. He rose from his chair in rage and was about to grab Ben when two large, well-built men grabbed him from behind. Mario whispered forcefully into John's ear, no trouble in my restaurant, understand? If you want to fight over a woman, take it outside. You can enjoy my lasagna, but you can't ruin this place for everyone else. John nodded. He was still red with anger, but sat down reluctantly. Ben sadly added, John, you married Mel or Melinda 2 years ago. I married her over 5 years ago. Look at the date on the photo. He did so. After glancing at the photo, then Ben several times, the truth sank in. Ben had never seen a man so physically collapse into his seat as John did. It seemed as if every bone in his body melted. The absolute devastation in his body was reflected in the hollow look of his eyes, which were tearing up uncontrollably. You mean but Mel married me while she was married to you. Isn't that illegal? I'm sorry, man. This is just too much for me to take in. I loved her with all my heart. She was everything to me. How could she do this to me, to us? Why would she do this? It is the ultimate betrayal. When I met her, I thought I would spend the rest of my life with a beautiful, smart, loving, determined woman. We couldn't have kids. The doctors made that very clear. She even showed me the medical reports. I loved her. At this point, his head fell forward and he dissolved into fits of sobbing. Mario was not impressed, but allowed the obviously distraught man to let out his feelings. It was also the Italian way. Just to be sure his fellow patrons were okay with this, he treated them all to a free drink. He himself poured a generous shot of grappa, which he kept behind the counter. Displays of such emotions were just so manly for an Italian, and it reminded him of his own divorce. John's sobbing finally sort of ended. He looked up into the teary eyes of the messenger of his reason for such sadness. Ben, I am sorry. You have also felt what I am feeling. Forgive me for accusing you. It should be me that is the target of your anger. I admit that I came here to beat you up. When I met you and started talking to you, I realized that you were also a victim of this cruel situation. I am lucky in that I have had 2 weeks to process this betrayal. You have only had 1 hour. John's eyes took on a determined look. One Ben had seen in his own mirror days and weeks ago. That lying, scheming jerk has to pay. We can't let that level of betrayal go untouched. They have to pay, and they have to pay hard. I know what you mean, John. In about a week, all of their stuff from Perth will arrive at your apartment. Melinda should be arriving in Perth soon, so be prepared for a phone call from her. The house we used to share is completely empty. I moved all of my stuff to a new apartment, which they won't find very easily. I left no clues. I left the divorce papers in the hands of a court server who will be waiting at our old home for the moment they arrive, to serve them. I suggest you do the same. No doubt they will think of a way to get back here as soon as possible to see what you know. John looked overwhelmed by the situation, so over the next 3 hours, at their apartment, I took him through the steps needed to distance himself from Mel. The financial stuff was taken care of by the end of that day. His business also was able to be sold as mine was, also with the same conditions. His clients were only too happy to wait for a reestablishment of his business after his impending divorce. Seems like it was a more common occurrence here in the big city. He knew a lawyer who could get the papers prepared very quickly. As usual, but it wasn't a case of what you know, but who you know. Surprisingly, the papers were ready to be served the next day. This speed was unheard of. John's lawyer must have really pulled some strings for it to happen so quickly. It was during this preparation process that John got his phone call. Melinda couldn't call Ben because he had blocked her number in his cell phone. There were some numbers from unidentified callers, but he ignored them. She had obviously tried to use different phones to call from. John looked at his mobile and saw the caller ID. He was conflicted as to answer or not. Ben convinced him to, but not give any hint that he knew what was going on. Mel, what a surprise. You don't usually call me so quickly after arriving in Perth. Is everything okay? John put the phone on speaker so that Ben could be party to the conversation. John, love. No, everything's fine here. Has anything unusual happened back at our apartment over the last 7 hours or so? No. Everything's the same old, same old. Why do you ask? Ben admired the way John was keeping it together. He didn't think he could have if it was him receiving that call. It brought on a new level of respect for this guy. Oh, nothing. Just asking, that's all. Hey, great news, babe. I am able to return to Sydney earlier than expected. Something has come up at work there. I will fly back on Wednesday night. Love you. See you then. You know what time to expect me by. Goodbye, Mel, returned John with a grim sense of finality. He didn't wait for Melinda to question his grim tone. He ended the call abruptly. They both sat there, lost in their reminiscences of what they had both lost, or were about to lose. They had both been sucker punched by the same person. Ben helped John gather all of his stuff. The packers he had called arrived and took all of his stuff to another apartment, which they were able to rent with Bruce's help. They both looked at the half-empty apartment and sat heavily on the remaining lounge furniture. You know, John, when I first walked into this apartment, it was freaky how so much of it was similar to our house back in Perth. It seems like they wanted both places to be as similar as possible, so that they felt like they were at home no matter which place they were in. Is that a bottle of fine Margaret River red I see over there? John looked over and a wry smile crossed his lips. Yep, that collection is Mel's pride and joy. They spent months combing the Margaret River wineries, even all the way to M.T. Barker. That collection represents the finest and most expensive reds that part of Australia has to offer. I think we owe it to ourselves and those fine winemakers to sample at least 90% of the collection before we leave here. What do you think? Well said, my friend, replied Ben with an equal sense of mischief. Shall we start with this Pinot Noir? I am sure the light fruitiness will help pave the way for the more solid Shiraz and maybe the Cabernet Sauvignon. The drinks began, and with each new glass, the two compared notes of their lives with Melinda. The first bottle of wine, a fine Pinot Noir, saw them comparing their dress habits, the quirky way they put on their socks under their outfits, how they always put on their left shoe first, how they adjusted their clothes at least a couple of times before leaving the house, how they looked in the mirror at least a couple of times before being satisfied, how the color of their accessories always had to match that of their outfits. The second bottle, a fine Merlot from Swan River Winery, saw them comparing their speech habits. How they always came home with the same greeting. "Hi babe, how was your day?" Mine was the same old busy, busy, busy. Can't wait to tell you all about it. How they always complimented the meal they were having with the same words. "Oh my goodness, what have you done to this dish? It's delicious." How they always left in the mornings with the same words. "Okay babe, I'm off to conquer the world today. See you later." And love you the third bottle of wine. A stunning Cabernet from M.T. Barker saw them comparing their hobbies. Did you notice that just before they finish a task, their eyes do this little flutter? That's when you know it's almost done. They both nodded in agreement, being careful not to spill the wine. They love to try new recipes. That's always a surefire way to get them excited. I always suggest we try a new dish, and they light up. Again, the nodding in agreement. We couldn't get enough of each other during the night before they left. We spent hours talking and laughing. It was magical. Nodding followed by laughter at this stage. The fourth bottle of wine, a deep Shiraz, saw them quietly sitting, eyes hooded, speech slurred. They weren't going to get anywhere near 90% of the seller's offerings. That person has to pay. "I haven't been so devastated in my whole life." You're right, friend. What can we do to make them pay? They may have come up with some sort of revenge plot. But as is the way of overusing alcohol as a tool for creativity, it completely wipes the memory clean before the next session of consciousness begins. The next morning was not pretty. Both Ben and John stumbled to the kitchen where toast and Vegemite were in order. To their credit, neither of them got sick. It took them until lunchtime to be in any way respectable. It was time to visit Mario's again, this time John's treat. Mario greeted them with a knowing look and a promise to give them just what they needed to overcome their obvious pain. Lasagna. He came to join them after they had finished and placed the bottle of good Tuscan grappa and 3 glasses on the table. "So my friends, I see that you have sorted your relationship trouble out." Bruce had filled him in, along with anyone in the bar who would listen. "You know I am Italian, from Sicily. We have a way of sorting out such matters, but I do not think that it would be allowed here in Australia. What do you propose to do about them?" Both Ben and John were taken aback by Mario's upfront statement and question. They each had the same question. "What happens in your village to be so bad?" "Aha," Mario replied. "The person is simply escorted to a waiting fishing boat and taken across the sea to Libya. There are lots of rich Arabs wanting a servant for the right price. We are renowned negotiators, so the partner gets a fair reward for their loss. The same also happens to a straying partner, although the offended spouse usually gets double for them." He laughed with that deep belly laugh that can't help but be infectious. They all laughed while Mario poured out generous shots of grappa. "Cheers," he shouted, and they all downed the shots. Ben and John spluttered and coughed, which brought on more bouts of laughter followed by another generous pouring. "Always catch the snake where it thinks it is safest," said Mario suddenly. "Where does this snake think they are safe?" Ben and John looked at each other and then at Mario's grim face. They said simultaneously, "At work." "Then that is where we must cut off its head," stated Mario while pouring another shot. There followed a detailed discussion about how to create the maximum amount of hurt at work for Melinda. Work was everything to her while she was everything to Ben and John. She had betrayed their trust and love to the ultimate degree, and now it was her turn to be betrayed to the maximum degree. The lawyer who was engaged by Ben was in Perth, but had provided a colleague here in Sydney who could do the work required. Basically, both Ben and John wanted to sue Melinda for damages brought about by her marriage to 2 people at the same time. In New South Wales, Section 92 of the Crimes Act 1900 makes it an offence punishable by a maximum penalty of 7 years imprisonment to marry a person whilst already married to another. This is known as bigamy. This made the betrayal enacted by Melinda a criminal act which would have to be dealt with in a criminal court before any civil action could be taken. The criminal element had to be dealt with first. This was the job of John Bill's ESQ, barrister, to deal with. He accepted the brief from Ben's solicitor's friend with glee. He hadn't seen such a clear-cut case of bigamy for many years. Melinda's company, so eager to be settled amongst the big businesses in Sydney, would not take kindly to having a convicted criminal in its top-rank executives. Also in the wings, John's solicitor was prepping to sue Melinda for civil damages. All of the legal ducks were in a row, so to speak. What both of them dreaded, but both needed, was closure with Melinda. The showdown was looming as her flight was due within the hour. Both Ben and John prepared the apartment. There were tissues, non-alcoholic beverages, along with a voice recorder hidden carefully amongst the sparse furniture. The beverages were mainly for Ben and John. When she arrived, John greeted her at the door as usual. "Hi, babe. Am I glad to see you? All sorts of mess has come down here at the office, and the boss allowed me to return here as soon as this." She hugged John as normal and entered the room. Ben winced at the obvious show of affection from Melinda to John. This was how she normally would greet him. The pain of the situation again came to bite him. He couldn't help but stifle a small sob. At first, it didn't register with Melinda, who was there, but the sparseness of the room alerted her first to the scenario to come. "What the heck, babe? What did you do to the apartment? Where's all of your stuff?" She scanned the apartment again and saw Ben for the first time. "Oh no. Oh my gosh, Ben. What are you doing here? I tried to call you while in Perth Bay, but..." She paled significantly and her knees shook noticeably. Her normally deep green eyes took on a hooded look. She didn't know where to look. She stopped talking as the reality of the situation dawned on her. The tears started flowing and the sobs were genuine, but both failed to impress Ben and John. They waited grimly while she got her emotions under control. "I can explain," she whimpered. They waited. "Ben, John," she started. "We just want the truth, please," Ben stated. "Not that it will make any difference to the outcome of this betrayal, but please, just please explain why. Why would you betray our years of marriage to lure another man into believing he was the one? Why? Just why?" Melinda took a deep breath. The game was up. She was cornered, and to her credit, she didn't attempt to lay any more lies on either of them. Her determination, normally an admirable character trait, kicked in to allow her to tell the truth. "I loved you both. I still love you both. Ben, when I left to take on this job, I honestly thought we could survive the 2-week separations. What I didn't expect was the utter devastation of my infertility. I felt as though I had failed as a partner and failed as a future parent. I missed you terribly, Ben, but I didn't want to admit my weakness. My pride wouldn't allow me to give in. I knew you were there for me. You always have been. But I needed to be stronger. I needed to succeed at this no matter what my feelings were. I realized soon after that this pride and determination were only driving me deeper and deeper into despair. I don't know how I managed to hide it when I was again with you in Perth, but I did. I focused this devastation into my work and felt a little relieved that it filled the void somewhat. My work kept me busy interviewing new employees like John. When I first met him, I was stunned at how much he resembled you, Ben. I was drawn to John like a magnet. He had the same mannerisms, the same style of dress. Even his walk was like yours. My longing for you, Ben, only increased every time I saw John. After a while, it was like you two morphed into the same person, my loving partner. John, do you remember all of those so-called follow-up interviews for your role as a software developer for our company? Only the first one was needed. I knew you were right for the job after the first interview. The others were solely for my benefit. I was infatuated with you, just as I was infatuated with my first partner, Ben. I thought that I didn't need to feel that loneliness anymore. I willingly pursued you, John. Part of me recognized that it was wrong, but I was too weak to say no. But you were already married, Melinda. Married to me. I was completely devoted to you. Why would you need another to take my place?" sighed Ben. "I don't know, Ben, my love. I just knew that I could. I missed you so much, but my pride wouldn't let me come home and admit that to you. I couldn't let John go. John, I truly loved you and still do. You are so much like Ben, it was like you were a copy. How could I not love you as well? Ben, I loved you and still do. I don't know how I can ever make it up to either of you. I cannot choose between you. I need and love both of you." Again, the sobs and tears. Tissues were produced, but the seriousness and firmness of Ben and John remained. When she again regained control, Melinda looked at both men. She saw the seriousness and loss of love in both of their eyes. She knew then that what she had done had lost the love of both men that she professed to love. There was nothing more she could say. Her betrayal was laid bare for everyone to see. The practical part of her mind took over. No amount of tears and begging was going to make any difference to her destiny. She knew it. The die was cast, the game was set in motion. She had to accept what was coming. Her body seemed to shrink as she resigned herself to her fate. Ben added, "There is only one thing I can say, Melinda. You betrayed me and set aside our love and trust simply because you thought you could. All of the times I have comforted you, encouraged you, supported you in those difficult days we faced together, All of that was swept aside like so much trash. I can never forgive you for what you have done. I also will never forget what you have done. You have destroyed a valuable part of my character. My ability to trust those I love and will love in the future has been destroyed thanks to your selfish actions. I hope and pray that I can recover from this poisoning of my soul and live a satisfying life. Thanks for nothing. John, friend, you know where to find me. He got up and left without another word. Melinda sobbed again and hugged herself in a vain attempt to find comfort. John, she began. Her pleading eyes displayed the desperation she was feeling. Could she at least find comfort with one of the men she so cruelly betrayed? John interrupted her. Don't, Mel. Don't even try to justify what you have done. You have destroyed a wonderful part of Ben's character as well as mine. I thought the world of you, Mel. When you came into my life, but I thought that I had died and gone to heaven. I loved you so much. When you explained about your work situation, I readily accepted it. I accepted it because I loved and trusted you. I would have given my life for you, Mel. What were a few weeks apart as a sacrifice compared to that? Like Ben, I don't know if I can ever trust another person like that again. You know what they say, once bitten, twice shy. Goodbye, Mel. Enjoy your future, but know that neither Ben nor I will be part of that future. John left and left the door open. Melinda collapsed onto the floor and remained there until well after dark. The desolation felt in her soul was mirrored by the emptiness of the nearly empty room of the apartment. When she roused herself, she didn't know because everything she did from that point on was a blur. Worried neighbors saw that the door was open to apartment 276 and Mel, the lady they occasionally saw, was strewn across a lonely lounge seat quietly sobbing. The medical responders took her to Sydney North Shore Hospital, where she was kept for observation. Epilogue: Ben left for Perth on the next available flight. He never visited Sydney again. It had only sad memories for him. Fortunately, the divorce proceeded without contest, and after 6 months, the temporary divorce decree arrived in the mail. The last nail in the coffin of his marriage. His mom remained mystified by the whole sorry tale. She would often tell anyone near her, or anything near her, I liked that girl. What happened? John also had his divorce completed. It was quicker for him as the court decided that his marriage to Mel was null and void in the first place. Melinda's boss got a very legal-looking letter informing him of the circumstance surrounding the strange behavior of his protégé. It was enough for the company to fire Melinda immediately, but not enough to stop a lawsuit brought on by both Ben and John regarding the apparent condoning of this bigamous behavior. The company settled out of court. Melinda was tried by the Perth Supreme Court on 1 count of bigamy and sentenced to 5 years in Sydney's Long Jail. Both Ben and John have restarted their businesses thanks to the startup funds granted by the successful civil action. They remain good friends to this day and often meet up in Uluru, the midpoint between Perth and Sydney. They call each other the good guy buddies. Both Bruce and Mario love to share the story of their friendship with everyone they meet. No one involved in this mysterious tale ever saw Melinda again,